spinsters that they have talking points that are from whatever political party that they subscribe to, and they take the day's events and they try to spin it to one party's advantage or the other, and it's devoid of logic. It's devoid of like substance on both sides, on all sides, and it's a giant part of like the media landscape, and it is extremely annoying. It is extremely frustrating when you hear people engage in that kind of conversation. But like YouTube podcasts are not much better. Like I watch a lot of I
What are
because
you trying to say, Michael? What are we doing here?
oh, we're just feeding the beast. That's what we're doing.
Oh yeah, this is
Not
real
even
news here.
in a substantial way. Yeah,
Independent journalism at its
yeah,
best.
that's weird. But no, like I watch a lot of like debate clips and things like that, and even some of the shows like the one versus the 1v20 shows that I'm sure you guys have seen, right?
Oh yeah.
I've seen some of those.
20 God believers or whatever. And like even that is,
Hold on, you should say God believers.
yes, that is. I mean, you could call them deists or you could call them theists. There's a bunch of different terms for the people that believe in gods, but God believers could be one of them conceivably.
Religious folk. I
Religious
suppose,
folk, yeah. That one particularly, I watched there's the one where it was one atheist versus 20 Christians, and then it was one Christian versus 20 atheists, and it was Jordan Peterson that represented a Christian, which was
I saw some of that one, yeah.
what's funny because like it's titled one Christian versus 20 atheists, and then they're all like, "You're a Christian," and Jordan Peterson's like, "I'm not a fucking Christian." Well, what are we doing here?
I did think that was weird. Yeah, that was strange.
Huh.
Like I actually listened to a lot of I started reading David Hume, this fella right here. He's a Scottish philosopher, and I started reading him because he was mentioned a bunch of times in a couple different books with some smart people, and so I started reading him, and he's like an empiricist, right? Hey, stop it, go lay down. His whole kind of system revolved around um, getting rid of superstition to like a good extent, and focusing in on like how we are conscious and like how the experience of being alive is, and what like empirical observation is, and like how you can kind of navigate those things. And um, I branched off of that into some like talks with some of those people that had recommended him, and then we're debating Jordan Peterson, which was interesting, and seeing some of the like the differences in the way people approach that idea of like God versus um, more scientific approach, an atheist approach, whatever you want to kind of call it. Very interesting.
It's a big topic.
It is.
A never-ending one.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm gonna try to do something with the dog. Hold on. What do you want? What do you want, crazy? Come here. Come on. She didn't like that.
So you got some fuel for the fire?
As soon as you get on topic, sure. As long as we keep it civil in uncivil times.
Yeah, we don't have much time tonight.
Yeah. Oh. Uh-oh.
But I was I don't know if you guys have stuff you want to get into or if you want to start rambling, but I was like I said, I was reading David Hume. It was a bunch of like atheist and religious kind of comic book stuff, and then I got while I was in Scotland, I got a book on fairies, which is really interesting if you've never really gotten into the mythology of like where Celtic, Irish, Scottish fairy kind of lore comes from, and what it means, and it's really, really interesting. And one of them was pretty cool. You'd probably like this. It's so fairies were a thing in Ireland and Scotland, right? And Catholicism,
They weren't
Christianity.
just a thing, they were fucking real.
Well, they still are to a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
Christianity and Catholicism came to kind of like the Isles, right? And it didn't really get rid of belief in fairies, right? Like the really core believing people of fairies still kind of subsisted throughout, like even to today. But what they did was it kind of like merged into one. And so one of the like leading theologians of the time had this thought on fairies, which was that when Lucifer fell, when he was kicked out of heaven, there's a scene that's written. I forget exactly where it's written, but that like it's not just Lucifer that leaves, right? A bunch of angels go with Lucifer,
Yeah.
and one of the angels kind of like calls out to God, and he's like, "The city is emptying. Like there's going to be no one left, right?" And so God like closes the door, right, and shuts it off, and the who's ever on one side is on one side, and whoever's on the other is in heaven. And Lucifer falls, and all the like rebellion people fall, and they end up in hell. But a bunch of other angels fall who were like less guilty and less culpable in the crime of like rising up against God. And those are what became the fairy. So they fell into the land, into the ocean, into the air, and they became all of these different types of fairies and these like kind of layers of kind of like pantheons of like demigods almost. And because Catholics love like kind of a
Sure.
demigod, if they love anything, right? They love the saints, they love these kind of like
Mhm.
not just God and then everyone else, right? They like these kind of layered approach to these sorts of things. And so yeah, I thought that was an interesting like way to combine the two of them, and an interesting thought on the fairies from the Catholics, which is cool.
Yeah, I think I have heard that concept before.
Yeah. And then there's a you want to get into like the alien thing, it's really interesting.
A lot.
But
Well, okay. Just on that note, I've heard that same concept applied to like all the pagan beliefs,
y-
or pagan meaning just not Christian. So a way to explain all of the not
yeah,
Christian pantheons is to say
yeah,
that, oh, they're the fallen angels that got kicked out of
yeah.
heaven.
There's a the I believe Christopher Hitchens makes this argument, which is against religion, in that the reason that you see a lot of this happen where Christianity doesn't outright deny the existence of these things, but seeks to kind of like square it into their own religion. Like you can view it as like a kind of way to control people, right? And you want to ingratiate them, so you don't want to lose them in your like takeover of their culture in your religion. But another way to read it is that if they say that these things aren't real, it reflects on their statements about their religion, because religion is inherently unprovable. And if you're saying that that's not real, like fairies aren't real because obviously fairies aren't real, the same statement applies to your God, and they don't like that, right? Like
I see.
you have to,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't say it doesn't exist. You have to rationalize it within your own religion. And so you end up with these very like hodgepodge connections between paganism or whatever you different religions taking over the other religion, which is an interesting concept too.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
But the alien angle was I didn't really think about it, right? But so there's a ton of stories going back into the like 1200s, 1100s, to even to date, of fairy abductions. So
Right.
people that
Yeah.
claim that they have been taken by fairies repeatedly throughout their life, starting from childhood all the way up into adulthood, being gone for years. It kind of talks about like if you like read anything about alien abduction and then you read about fairy abduction, you're like, it's the same fucking thing. Like there's
Yeah, yeah.
literally almost zero difference between those two things. Um, and it's really interesting because like clearly you have a phenomenon that is transcending like a time, right? Like it's the same basic stories of people saying like, oh, this has happened to me. This is very kind of real experiences that people are having and have had for a very very long time, and rationalize it kind of one way or the other. So it's interesting to delve into that history and like where it comes from and some of
Yeah.
the
It's
reasons
not
for
just
it.
a modern uh phenomenon that's happening, you know.
when it morphs too, right? So when the reports of fairy abductions went down was at the same time when the alien abduction stories started becoming more prevalent, right? And so what is this phenomenon? I know there was the psychologist from like there's that movie, um, The
Fourth
Fourth
kind.
Kind, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
where there is nobody can state, I think, with any believability that those stories aren't real in some way, right? It's too prevalent, it's too widespread to be a hoax, right? Like it just an entire completely made up fictitious hoax. Like a good part of it is for sure, but it's
Well, that's
so
the main
widespread.
argument with it
What's
anyways,
that?
right? That's the main argument with it anyways. It's like, how could all these people from all these times, from different religions and different backgrounds have the same story, right? This goes back to the ancient astronaut theory where, it's like, how did all these civilizations have these same beliefs that these gods and supposedly, came and taught them all these things? That's the same thing repeating over and over.
The argument that atheists and people that don't believe that this is a tangible physical thing that is happening, right? That they don't believe people are actually being abducted by aliens, and they don't believe that people are actually being abducted by fairies.
Things like sleep paralysis and
There is a legitimate thing that is happening that is somewhat unexplainable, right? But that does not
regardless
mean
something is happening, what
something's
it is up
yes.
for debate.
Is it psychological? Is it some sort of like innate human reaction? We don't know, but the atheist, the scientist will see something unexplainable and say that that is something that is yet to be explained, not that is an example of supernatural. Right, and, like, that's where the general difference kinda starts to come in, and even aliens, right, is an interesting concept because it's like it's aliens aren't really a supernatural concept, right? Like, if they exist, they would exist within the parameters of physics and the universe. They're not necessarily something that is spiritual or inherently unscientific or unphysical, right?
I don't know. I think there's so many different theories for aliens, and so you'd really have to define supernatural and why
You
aliens wouldn't
do.
be supernatural.
Yeah. Well, and see, the thing is, like, so the scientists and the atheists will look at the alien stories, and like it kind of depends on the way in which you're talking about it. So, like Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how aliens are real because when you look at all the scientific data and you look at the building blocks of life, the fact that we're made up out of the most common elements that exist in the universe, the fact that you look at all the stars, you look at all the galaxies, you look at how prevalent matter is, it would be an insane waste of space for us to be the only life. Like they're just there. You can't look at everything we know and come away with the conclusion that aliens don't exist.
I thought he
The
was one of the biggest skeptics for aliens, though.
No,
Like,
well, so
for
the skeptic part of it comes in if they visit us or not, right?
Yeah,
Like
he
we're
doesn't
like,
think
yeah,
that we've come in contact with them. I think that's his thing is they exist, but they're so far away that
yeah,
we've not contacted them and they've not contacted us. And if they were able to contact us, then everybody would know because they'd probably be predatory and just try to like take over.
yeah. And he goes real deep into a lot of that, like the different types of things scenarios that could happen, but like the basic core of what he talks
did he
about.
have, like, a long form video that he put out or something about that?
Oh, yeah, a ton. You could just look up Neil deGrasse Tyson and aliens, and he's got a ton of them.
I
Or
mean, I
honestly,
can
like I
look
read
it up.
his book, and he talks about it a lot in his books as well. He's got a whole chapter. He he's done work with like SETI, right? So the search for extraterrestrial. I forget the
Right,
acronym,
right.
right? But
Intelligence.
yeah, they're the
Intelligence.
group that has all the satellites. They've spent a lot of time and money and effort into both looking for and trying to send like signal, like radio signal out throughout space, right? They're looking very specifically to try to discern patterns that wouldn't be made by natural causes, but would be some form of a signal, right? Like we human beings, since the 1910s or so, I don't know exactly, have been creating radio waves that have been leaking out into the universe, right? Like all of our radio shows, our TV, our
Yeah.
communications, right, have just been smashing outwards into the universe. And so any intelligent being that could parse through those signals could pick up on the fact that we exist, right? And so we could do that of them too, if you look at it. The
Yeah,
problem,
if all the nuclear bombs we set off didn't do it.
yeah, sure, but well, but so nuclear explosions are not necessarily unseen in the universe, right? Like suns, you have supernovas. Like a nuclear explosion is not necessarily a sign that they're of intelligent life, right? But like a radio wave is like that's a signal that contains language or something concerning it. It does.
We pick up radio signals from the darkness of space all the time. We're like, "Oh, it's the new
Well,
civilization, blah, blah,
well,
blah."
there
There's
are
radio
people that
waves
will
that
talk
are
about that. Like
pouring all through the galaxies as well.
the main scientists tend to not believe. Like they'll find like there was some religious. I don't want to say quack, but some religious quack who pointed like a radio listening device towards the center of the Earth and picked up on a bunch of like weird noises and then put it
I
through a bunch of
heard about
filters.
this, and it was like screaming. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like thought
yeah,
he
yeah.
found hell or something.
That
You
was what
know?
it was. Yeah, it was a
Yeah, yeah,
claim that he had proof positive that not only did hell exist, but it was in fact in the center of our Earth.
yeah, yeah.
And what he had done was he picked up on the real actual signals and things that emanate from the powerful forces of the Earth and the core, and was listening to it, but then also put it through filters and like tweaked it into a way that would make it sound like something, and then called it a signal, right? And you could do a similar thing with space stuff, space signals, background radiation. Like one of the reasons we know the Big Bang uh, happened is because of our analysis of background radiation and like signals essentially, and turning that into something that's understandable to us, which is fun. What you got going on there?
I think well, the difference with like the the radio waves that are just naturally occurring in the universe, you hook it up to an antenna and it just sounds like crackling or sounds like
Yeah,
nonsense. But if it's an actual radio wave
yeah.
with information from somebody's voice, then when that gets decoded
Well, I
into
think also
an
what they're
analog
looking
signal, then you can hear the person's voice, and then you
Here's
know
I
it's an intelligent
this
yeah, they're
being.
also
patterns.
looking for, like, systematic
Yeah,
signals, right? Like, signals that repeat, signals that have a cadence of some sort.
patterns. Yeah,
Yeah, patterns, right, exactly. So they're also looking for that, which in the universe, there are patterns as well. So it's like
there are. And so that it like it gets really complicated, right? And there are people that have spent their entire
why are they
lives
doing
in
this? This is
pursuit of
weird.
you know looking with these signals and figuring out some of the stuff. But to circle back to like the beginning kind of thoughts of this with like aliens and fairies and abductions, and if aliens could be considered supernatural, and like how you talk about these things is important. The idea that
Yeah.
like aliens are scientific is true if you talk about it through the Neil deGrasse Tyson's kind of a lens. If when you see something unexplainable, you just say aliens, right? Then you're treating it as a supernatural cause, right? You are using it as a god, right? Or an explanation for something you don't understand, and saying it must be aliens that have done this, or aliens had to do this because we don't understand it, right? And that's where it kind of
Right.
gets a little supernatural, or that they possess powers that like are so not even above us, but are beyond kind of the scope of reality.
Our
Right?
our understanding, our current
All understand.
understanding.
Fair enough, right? Like there in a lot of the readings I'm doing, right? Like there's a thing called the Copernican syndrome, right? You gotta stop Copernican syndrome, where like back in the day, right? Copernicus it was one of the first people that realized that the sun didn't revolve around the Earth; we revolved around the sun, right? That basic like shift of understanding was a super like crazy one that shocked the world, right? But the fact that it was so natural for us to believe that we were the center of the universe is because of our general perspective of how we view things, and the fact that we are individuals who have subjective realities, right? And so when we looked outward, we also applied our same bias to the universe. We were like,
Or projecting.
if I'm an individual and I'm the center of my universe, obviously we're the center of the universe, right? And so we apply our own self-worth and our ideas to external things first, right? And then it usually takes a lot of science and vetting to understand that that was completely incorrect, and we have to kind of readjust how we view things, right? And so like it's an interesting concept to view aliens through that lens of whether it's supernatural or scientific. And I like the idea, right, that people will talk about miracles or things that are devoid of like an act that is inherently breaks the laws of physics, right, or couldn't be explained by science. And I think like the atheist and the scientist will look at those and say, like, if I right now started like floating in the air and there was no explanation for how I was floating in the air, right? There weren't wires, right? There wasn't like a forklift behind me. Like there was like a genuine display of an act that would seem to break physics. What we would be seeing is physics we don't understand. We wouldn't be seeing something that couldn't exist in the universe, because like if it happens here,
You seeing a
it
Chris
means
Angle
it's
performance.
it's
But
yeah,
then,
exactly, right? Yeah. But like that's the thing, right? Like that in order for existence to exist and in order for things to interact with our existence, they have to be real, right? And like that
oh,
basic
but then you can say the beings or the fairies or the aliens or whatever we're talking about just exist in a plane
yes.
that is physics that we don't understand.
No, yes,
You
yes,
know?
yes. But there's a clear difference between saying this, and this is kind of where you get between like an alien supernatural explanation and like a religious supernatural explanation, because religions love to talk about things as being above kind of the normal rules that exist outside of like the parameters of physics, and that can miracles by their nature are like a suspension of physics to prove the divinity or to prove the omnipotence or to prove the power of a god or a gospel or a theology, and by their nature need to be something above science, right? And so the atheists and the scientists say that like that's incorrect. Like even if somebody named Jesus exists and did some of these things, water to wine, all these different things, there would be realistic physical laws that applied and allowed for those things to happen. Like you can't say that they did those things devoid of physical interaction, because you have to have physical interaction on some level, right? Even if like an interplanar being, right? Even if you want to talk about that, a being that is above our plane of existence can never interact with our existence unless it interacts with our existence, right? Like
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
has to at some
I
point
mean,
pierce into our dimension
if
and
you see
interact
it,
physically with what we are, right? Like otherwise there's a barrier that you can't breach, right?
if you are seeing something, the photons from this universe are
Yes.
hitting your eyes because
Yes.
that thing manipulated it.
That
It's
does not mean that that's the full statement of what that thing is, right? Because it exists in a dimension that's beyond our understanding, but it's representing itself within our physical universe using our physical laws, right? And so the core belief behind a lot of like empiricism and atheism and scientific approach, right, is we exist in a universe that can be observed and interacted with, and because we know that, and because we like by very basic logic, anything we were to observe would be in this universe. Like you can't, by definition, observe something that does not exist in this universe. Like just basic logic tells you that that cannot happen, right? Like
that
it
is
is
a very logical statement. I mean, I
Sure,
think
but it doesn't mean it originated in this universe.
no, but you don't have any proof that it didn't, right?
like
And,
let's
and
say
your only
there's
proof,
12 dimensions, beings exist on other dimensions. Well, those dimensions still exist and are part of physics that
yes,
just we don't understand.
yes,
So I
yes,
think I understand what you're saying, and I think it
Logically, it's
probably
somewhat
causes
sound.
more
I'm not going to give you double
separation to
credit,
argue about
but
it.
it's somewhat sound.
it's extremely sound. And but like that's the thing, right? Like the when you start talking about interdimensional beings, one of the things that makes like the idea that aliens could be some form of interdimensional creature that is trying to push its will or its intent into our physical universe, and so we get all of these things of abductions and various other unexplained phenomenon. The reason that that is more plausible than like the idea of a god or a deity, right, is that it is backed up by interesting physics, theoretical physics like string theory, multiverse theory. Like you have legitimate scientific fields of study that have gone very deep into the mathematics of this and have some theoretical basis to stand upon. Whereas with theologian or a religious person, the only proof they've ever put forward is because I say so. Like, honestly, like when you boil it down, like that's the reason why they do it is because I was told by God, or this person was told by God, and I read it in this book, and they told me that this is real. And that's the only explanation that they have for any of it, right? Which is like the problem that a lot of scientists and atheists tend to have with religious doctrine, right? And then like from there you can get into a conversation about me and Adam were talking about, I forget the name of the guy who, like, a lot of scientists will say like, I don't believe in God unless it's this guy's God, and it starts with an S. It's like Cicero's God or something, Cicero's or something.
I
It,
know. I don't remember.
so he was, it's like back in the day he was persecuted for his like heretical beliefs at the time, right? But his idea of God was, if God exists, God is the expression of the physical mathematical reality in which we live in, right? And it's less of a actual being, an entity with intent, right? Who has a plan for everybody and has all of these
Sounds
specific.
like a program.
You could argue that it is a program, right? And like that's the idea, right? Is that like that level of God, which is kind of an amorphous God. It's not a specific. I don't know where it is, Cecilia. I can. I don't know. Is it in the car? It's not in there, right? Hold on one second. Mid conversation.
You need the leash.
Yeah.
I bet it's the leash.
Yeah. Yeah, this can get pretty deep into so many different topics, and there's so many different theories about
Yeah.
where aliens come from, if they're even real, I guess how they're expressing themselves in this universe, right? There was this one video that I saw where it's like a three-dimensional object cannot ever explain to a two-dimensional object what the third dimension looks like because it lives in the two-dimensional realm.
Flatland.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, flatland. Yeah,
we
exactly.
watched that
So,
video right, when one of these podcasts.
yeah, so it's fear, coming into the second dimension or into the 2D world, it would just look like a circle.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
it's like you can't ever explain to a circle what a sphere looks like.
no,
Exactly.
you can attempt, right, and you can. So it's a circle can. There are connecting points, right? So the idea of higher dimensions is, and you could even like there are some people that would probably argue that like this dimension that we live on can interact with this dimension and this dimension, but this dimension can't interact with this dimension because its orders removed, right? And like the connecting points are either non-existent or too complex to interact with, right? And so the immediate neighbors of your existence are ones that are close enough to where a circle couldn't understand a sphere, but it could interact in some way, right?
Right.
And that's where you get the idea of these beings that can kind of push into other dimensions
Yeah.
and force some sort of will
You get
or
these
move,
like orbs of light, right? Of some
Mm.
sort.
unexplainable, right? And so I was thinking about this too because like I read like Lovecraft, right? And it's interesting because when you start trying to think like Lovecraft is the fear of the unknown, and like an eldritch horror, a thing that should not exist in our universe that exists in our universe, right? To view that would break your mind, right? Like by again, kind of by definition, like if something cannot exist in this universe or should not exist in this universe and does, and you witness it, the consequences of that have to be severe, right? Like it has to be an aggressive uh destructive interaction, right? Like you can't have things that can't exist in the same space, right? And we know that from some scientific study, like when they, antimatter is a good example of that, right? Like
Obliteration.
what's that?
You get obliteration. Something's
Yeah, obliteration.
obliterated.
Yeah, when antimatter is a real thing, we know it's a real thing, and they can generate antimatter. But when antimatter comes into contact with any matter, it explodes. You cannot have antimatter interact with matter, otherwise it destroys itself, right? Like that's the function of the thing, right? Which goes back to kind of basic logic of if it exists in this universe, if it's visible, if we've witnessed it, it has to, on some level, either be of this universe or be represented by the effects of this universe, right? You can't have something that can't exist, right? You can't prove a negative, in other words, right? Which goes to the heart of most religions, most theologies, and a lot of the way people will talk about aliens and other things as kind of like a scapegoat for unknown things, right? So, well, it's
Yeah,
ancient.
I think it's. I understand the need to try and like the logic
Right.
behind it and say, oh, well, the religious people are. It's almost like it's semantics where they're just saying similar things in different ways. Where, and I understand the need for the logic and say, well, no, what you're saying is not following the scientific method. But it's like, well, just let them believe. Like, so what?
Sure,
you know?
sure, sure. And that's valid if they weren't saying that they knew the truth of things. And not only are they saying that they know the truth of things, that most organized religions are saying, I know the truth of things. And if you don't follow these things, you are going to burn in hell, or you are not worthy of protection, or we have the
Right.
right to kill you because you don't believe what we believe, right?
Or we have to kill it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So like it's you are not just claiming that you know something, right? You are claiming that you have been told by God that this is real and you have to kill for it and you have to die for it and all of these kind of religious beliefs that go along those lines. If you boil religion down into something that is amorphous and harmless, right? So if you take Christianity and you strip it of all of its horror that it exists, like in the Old Testament and even in the ideas of hell and eternal damnation, and the idea of a God that is omnipotent and yet allows such misery and pain to be inflicted upon children. Like if you remove the belief of those things and you're left with the concepts of like goodness and charity and just being a better person, right? Sticking to strictly moral thought, there's no problem there, right? There is no problem with you believing in a God, right? There is no problem with that. The problem is that's not religion. That's not been religion, and it's a little bit of a like a straw man argument to claim that like that is what like it's harmless for religion to exist, in its current state at the very least.
Yeah. Well, it's not only harmful though. Like, I think I
No, but
agree that we have to get rid of all of the negative things that comes from religion. That is really far from a lot of what the religions teach. You
well,
know.
but they're not though. Like and that's the thing that like a lot of people will defenders of religion will talk about like, well, they oh well they just kind of got away from the core messages, and it's like read the Old Testament. That's the core of the religion. The core of the religion was rotten. It was telling people to go into the desert and slaughter children and bash their brains out against rocks. Like, it was talking about owning slaves. It was not a moral doctrine to begin with,
I
and
think
it
one of the points that
evolved.
maybe Michael's trying to touch on is the fact that religion, to a very like large degree, is very intolerant, right? Like you cannot have religion with acceptance of everything. You have to have strict rules in religion where it's this is right, this is wrong. If you do this, you will go to heaven. If you do this, you will go to hell, and there are strict
Mhm.
consequences if you don't do the right thing, right?
Yeah,
So, and with that comes with people that are devoted to that religion and will fight
yeah,
to protect it, right? So, and
yeah,
every religion is that way,
yeah.
and I
What?
think that's one of the true core values of religion is
Mhm.
that like you have to follow it, otherwise
Yeah, and
there
there's
are fucking consequences.
there is a difference. So when people talk about religion, a lot of people use the term in the kind of like pseudo religious way in talking about belief and in talking about moral and in talking about a deity that is beyond our understanding, right? Most modern day Christians ascribe to some version of that, right? Like most modern day theology has had to adapt itself so far because we know so much about the physical world and because we know that all of these statements that have been made throughout religious history are incorrect or immoral. They've had to shed them. They go, okay, we're not the center of the universe. Okay, yeah, slavery is bad. Okay, yeah, well, maybe we shouldn't reject women when they're on their period from the village for fear of being contaminated, right? Like we know about germs. We know things that they didn't know and couldn't know. And what religion is left doing is receding further and further into a tiny little area that it can say it exerts any control over, which is just the unknown, right? And in that space, it really is the concepts of morality, the concepts of belief, the concepts that are more difficult to put into scientific expression. And religion claims still some authority over those spaces. But some still argue that it's not, that you can scientifically talk about moral, and you can scientifically talk about belief, and you can do that without the need to talk about a god, right? And deism, right? The idea of a belief in a god is different than religion or theocracy, right? The belief in a doctrine, the belief in a book, the belief in the rules as written, as given from a god, right? And I think people should understand the difference and use the term correctly. Like, we should get rid of religion because religion is the adherence to outdated immoral doctrine that was developed in the dark ages of our society, that punishes like people for existing, and claims that you are born with sin and forces you to atone for things that you haven't done, and scapegoats your own crimes upon another. Like,
Now, are you
these are not real
talking
facts.
mostly about Abrahamic religions?
Fair, right? Like, so definitely in a lot of there's a lot of reason why, like, I or somebody from America would tend to talk, or the West would talk about Abrahamic religions more forcefully, which is because we're brought up in it. Right? We're brought up in the culture. We're more aware of its effects on the world than a society that we don't. So, like, Buddhism, right? Taoism. Like, you talk about the Indian religions, the multi-pantheon religions, the Greek, the Norse, right? All of these, the Mayans, right? The way that they believe, multi-pantheon type belief systems are different in their effect, right? And you could argue that, and I think rightfully so, you can argue that all religion is false, but all religion has different effects on the world. And not all religions are equally as harmful, and not all religions are equally as beneficial, right? And so when you look at some of the Eastern religions, Buddhism in particular, right, there isn't a expressed belief in hell. There isn't an expressed belief in, like, a god, right? The Buddha is not a god in the sense that Abrahamic religions would consider him a god. The idea of reincarnation, of cycles, right? These are things that exist not as a god, but as a almost a scientific principle. It's a pseudoscientific principle, but it's a principle, right, that could exist without direct involvement of a deity. And most of the gods in those contexts, like, in the multi pantheons, they exist as very powerful beings, but not as all knowing, omnipotent creators
They're
and
flawed also.
dictators of reality, right? They are just orders of magnitude stronger than we are, and know more than us, and can interact with the physical world in ways that we can't possibly comprehend, right?
Almost like an alien.
Almost like an alien, 100%, right? Like, it was Stephen Fry, I think, that said this in one of the best ways, which was that, like, what religion is an attempt to explain something that you don't know, right? And so when you see a leaf fall from a tree and it gets blown by the wind, and you don't know what that is, right? You invent a god of the wind. And when you see the sun go across the sky, you invent Apollo, who in a chariot drags the sun from, the one side of the earth to the other, and then it hands it off to another god who takes it through the underworld on the other, because you don't know we're on a sphere, right? So you invent these gods to explain natural phenomenon, and then once you realize what that natural phenomenon is, you get rid of the god, because you no longer need a god of the sun for the sun to exist. We know what the sun is. Like, we know its function, we know its effect. We know what air is, we know what rain is and thunder, right? We don't need gods to explain that anymore. We can explain it with scientific expression. And so, like, when you look at religion, you start seeing the same pattern over and over again, of religion shrinking as we gain more understanding of the physical world. Religion's domain shrinks further, and often bristles, right? And so you can see that nowadays, if you want to transition into politics, into some of the most violent situations on the planet that are egged on by religious belief to some extent or another. and they bristle at the idea that they're losing their authority, and it becomes more and more the people that maintain this religious fervor become more radicalized by the fact that it becomes less powerful, right? And so they need to exert their physical violence towards people who reject it in order to try to establish domain back over them, right? Which is what you see religions in certain places try to reestablish their control over populations through violence and through control and through attack and submission, right? And that's you could see that in a lot of places around the world.
Like a dog being backed into a corner.
Hmm. And you know, like I mean, I and I think a lot of people would like to believe that we will continue to grow intelligently and we will continue to understand things, you know, about the reality we live in, to the point where religion, either as you kind of described it, right, becomes this sort of amorphous, just benign, on the margins, positive force for the world, and then the rest of reality is governed by science.
It's like,
Or
why do people have to force shit on other people? That it's like, dude, just do your own thing. And
and
if
that's the
other
thing.
people want to join, cool. If not, don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's it's
Well, it
so
depends on what
frustrating,
those
dude.
people are
It's so
doing.
frustrating.
Yeah, does what other people do affect you? Well, maybe not directly, but like if this civilization here is mass murdering their own people because they believe it's the religious duty to do so, are you going to intervene?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so this starts.
Yeah,
Right? So it's
definitely.
like
Well,
but Adam, you're forcing people to believe what you believe in. What
yeah.
come on.
Well, but no, no.
That's
But
not
so
Well,
like
here's another false argument, right? So here's another false argument, though. So, like again, this goes back to like the people who are intolerant of other people getting mad when you are when like if I say I am a tolerant person and I don't believe you should be intolerant of other people, right? If I make that statement, somebody who hates the Dutch, right, can come to me and say, "You, sir, who just said that you are tolerant of people, are not tolerant of my intolerance. You are not allowing me to be intolerant." And it's like, no, 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 no. That's not how that fucking works.
right.
You like me saying
If nobody
tolerance.
else caught that, that is a reference to Goldfinger,
It is.
Austin Powers.
Well,
Just in case nobody else caught that, okay? If anybody's from the '90s, all right, that's where it's from. All right.
there's
There's
only
one
two
thing that
things
I
two things I hate in the world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch. But like,
nice catch. Nice catch. That
it
I
was
totally
very
missed
good.
that
I
one.
thought I snuck it in there, but that was very good. Yeah. But like that's the thing, right? Is people will claim that when you talk about limiting their ability to be intolerant, that is an example of your intolerance, that you not tolerating their violence somehow makes you less tolerant. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like you're using a completely fictitious argument. Like it does not hold up when you look at it logically. What you're trying to say, you know what I mean? And
And
so,
I think most people, maybe I'm giving most people credit, but I think most people would agree that we have like some natural human rights that cannot be infringed upon, right? You can't harm another person. You can't violent towards
define
another person.
harm.
You can't enslave another person.
define
Like,
harm as
Define harming because there
define all of
are
these things, right?
yeah, exactly.
Define what the word is. You know, like, and this is like to not to pick on Jordan Peterson, but this is what Jordan Peterson will kind of do is he gets into these like word games of like because you can always regress further into a concept, right? You can always, when you're talking about like something you perceive, you can say, well, but what is perception, right?
Yeah, you keep
I give
asking
him some
why.
grace on that because I understand like you do need to really
No, no, no.
define what you're talking about if
I'm
you're gonna
not.
have these
Yeah, yeah, no.
conversations,
And I'm not saying he is not smart, and I'm not saying that he is not right about many things that he speaks about. The problem is when he gets backed into corners, what he does is he will use his words to start peeling backwards to confuse people. So he will, when you're talking about a concept of morality, right? If you don't like the way the conversation is going, you can start talking about, well, what is morality, right? What is vision? Like what is existence? What like how do we even know who we are or where we are, or what we are, right? Like nihilism, or like the I don't know if it's nihilism, but the idea that like everything is indefinable and therefore like nothing exists and nothing is real, right? Like there's a real philosophy behind those concepts, but they are somewhat devoid of meaning because like we exist, right? Like like yes, you can play with the concept of existence and you can question how we experience and what that means and like how like okay, I'm coming up with words, but I'm not necessarily logically thinking about every word I'm going to use, right? Like there's something more organic going on there, right? Like the way I view things, like I view the world, but that's just through the light reflecting off things, interacting with my eyeballs and being interpreted by my brain, right? My senses, all of these
Matrix.
things exist as neural pathways, right? And so when you talk about reality, like what is reality, right? You can devolve into that kind of a logic, which is useful for some conversations. But when you're talking about other things, it just serves to distract. And like Dawkins made this point really, really well. He was talking about so he talks about evolution, right? And he in the opening to his book, he talks about how if you were to ask somebody, how is a car made? Right. If we sat here and we're like, okay, like how does a car function, all right, like how do like explain to me how a car functions,
Well,
you would
first you
probably
go digging in a mine for
yeah
some
exactly.
rock.
But even before that, right before we even get to that, right, like let's talk
You have
about the
to,
origin of the universe, right, like let's talk about like how matter like coalesced, right, like it's not incorrect, like that plays a part in the creation and the operation of a vehicle, but that's not what we're talking about, you know what I mean? Like what we're talking about is how we create how a car works. And so you would talk about an engine, you would talk about wheels, you would talk about combustion, right? You would talk about how we get a car to exist. And if you cannot or will not engage in dialogue that is present in reality, and you constantly regress into an area of theoretical reality, right? There's value there, but not for the conversations that most people will have, right? And so like it's a big difference, and I think that it's one that uh, needs to be kind of imparted upon people, and that's when you get into these conversations about religion and theology and things that are unexplainable. It's important to ground yourself in reality as well, because again, we exist here, and what is the tangible effects or non-effects on what we're saying, you know?
Hmm. Well, I guess if you wanted to boil it down to the very bare essentials, you keep saying that you can always revert back to a more basic argument. It's like, oh well, what is this? Well, what is that? Well, then
Mhm.
just dial it all the way back, all the way back, and I mean all the way back. Just it's all vibration, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Even Einstein, even Einstein said, if you want to learn the nature of the universe, you you study vibration
mhm.
and
Yeah, like
frequency. So
you can
everything starts with vibration. So how's a car made? Vibration.
yeah. Yeah, and you're not wrong, right? Like that's the like yes, I'm correct, but also you didn't answer the question, and, and I'm not even convinced you understand what a car is. Like you're not wrong, but you're also absolutely not right. Like you're absolutely not right when you say that a car is vibration, right? Because that's under
We
the
are all
context of the
vibration, buddy.
conversation.
We're all
You're
vibration.
fucking wrong. You know what I mean? And like people, it's an art of debate where people are able to, when they don't like the area of the conversation, change it into a more favorable
Well,
venue,
it's
right?
bullshit because it doesn't necessarily like if you're having a debate, a true debate, and you want to, if truth matters, in a lot of situations, it's not about who actually knows the truth as it as it is. It's more about who has the best verbal prowess
Sure.
to fucking hopscotch around the subject and defeat the other person in a debate. Right? That's what
So
fucking politics is, and that's why it's bullshit.
so it's kind of funny because I'm gonna do like a real big 180 here. That's gonna feel hypocritical in a little bit. So like as much as I was like, don't regress into like simple concepts that don't have any value on the current conversation. I so the concept that you're talking about truth, right? Like what is truth, right? And it's funny that I'm going to start doing this, but a little bit I'm
There's
going
an
to
objective truth to
Well,
most
it's
things.
not, it doesn't mean that every time you try. I hear what you're saying, Michael, but it doesn't mean that every time you try And when somebody says, well, we need to define this before we can speak further on it, because we need to come
Yes.
in agreement
There's common
on
sense
what
in
this,
most
we need to
cases.
come to some common ground before we
Yes.
go any further with this
And
discussion, not keep like,
yes.
regressing into something else, but there's value
Yeah.
to coming to grounds on a
Yes.
term or something,
And there are, I've heard Peterson do that and clarify something that needs to be clarified, because you do have to clarify, like if we're like religion, like if we're talking about religion, we got to define what we're talking about first. Like we can't just jump into religion, because my concept of religion and your concept of religion could be very, very different, especially involving terms that are difficult to define, right? That have some nuance to them, right? Like starting out with like, let's define what we're talking about and move from there is
and
100%.
can be subjective, even
Yes,
Highly
right.
subjective, right?
Well, but so not to get too far afield, the concept that Frank was talking about, right, which is that like a debate is not necessarily about truth, like logic, right? A debate is about emotion,
And
and
it's about defeating the person across the way from you.
well, so one of the things that David Hume was talking about, which I like, so all this stuff I just talked about, right, is very much like scientific empiricism, talking about like, fact and logic as being the highest standard, right? And it's true. But David Hume has a concept that I can't refute and that I think is irrefutable, which is that logic in and of itself can never cause any action within reality. And what that means is
You
no
want to
amount of
explain that a little
logic,
bit more for some of us that are less learned, please?
no, so I'll try. So no amount of logic will make you want to do something, right? The
You sure?
reason that we ever do anything, the reason that we ever move, the reason that we move towards things that are pleasurable or away from things that are painful is not based on logic, right? I,
Sure about that?
it, yeah, it is all based upon what Hume would call like passions, right? Now logic can dictate the like parameters of a passion, right? And so like logic has and
Logic can influence action
it,
very
it can
much so.
influence action, but it can't cause it. And that's
Mm.
there's a subtle difference in this.
Are you
But
sure about that, buddy?
I am, yeah, I'm very confident about this, and so is
Okay,
Hume and some other people. Like, so the
sure.
idea is right, like it's sort of like
so
when
you're saying emotion is what drives action, not
yes,
logic,
yeah,
but the
logic,
logic can't influence the emotion.
Well,
yes,
because we're human beings, everything by nature then is driven by emotion because we are,
yes,
by definition, emotional creatures. So there is no
yes.
such thing as logic by that definition then.
No, there is, yeah, and this is where it gets really
Bullshit.
complex. This is where it gets really
Bullshit.
complex and interesting and very fun. But like, so
Bullshit.
Well,
logic,
you
like,
want to apply logic that's coming from emotion. So
yes,
what came
yes,
first, the chicken or
yes,
the
yes,
egg here?
yes, 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 yes. I think we can pretty confidently say that emotion came first. Like logic is and sort of like when Hume talks about these things, right? So all of our reality is based upon, in his terms, impressions and ideas, right? So an experience versus a thought, right? Like right now, I'm looking at you, I'm ingesting information through my eyeballs, I can touch the table, right? I have senses and sounds and all of the things that my body interacts with. Those are impressions, those are physical things that enter my consciousness and arrive into like my consciousness as a property of existing in the physical world. So that's the first like order of reality, right? Is that
Electrical
physical?
impulses.
What's that?
Electrical pulses.
Yes, right. That's the first thing is the physical interaction between your body, your consciousness, and the things around it, right? In Hume's logic and philosophy, every single impression creates a subsequent idea. So there's and it happens immediately. There's almost no awareness of this happening, but like when I touch a table, what that means is that I can now recall myself touching the table. So it immediately imprints an idea of what that table is inside of my brain, right? And
Memory,
so
in other words.
and so we exist as a relationship between kind of these two principles, right? And then we can create more complex thoughts based upon comparing two impressions together, two ideas, right? So
Mhm.
we can take the feeling of a table and the feeling of metal and make them compare inside of our minds and draw conclusions based on those comparisons, right?
Okay.
And this is where logic comes from, and where like a higher logical mind like human beings possess, some other animals as well, but human beings to it like a higher degree than we have ever experienced in the natural world, right? We are able to create those connections, which also, by the way, is interesting because that connection that I make, right, between a table and metal in my mind, right? Like I can touch a wooden table, I can touch some metal, and then I can imagine making a table out of metal, right? But that takes imagination, right? And that's a third kind of pathway in your brain, which is taking real concepts, real ideas, real impressions, and using your imagination to create things that don't even exist, right? Or that exist in a state that is different from reality. And so, like, all of that is explainable through mental progression, right? And you can kind of express that. And Hume, in his philosophies, goes into very, very great detail about all of these things. But all of that is prompted by the kind of the original impressions and ideas, and you're interacting with the world, and all that gets put into motion by your passions, as he would call it, emotions. Like, you could even call it the soul, right? Some people would want to refer to it as the soul, some people would want to refer to it as just pure consciousness, right? There's different terms for that thing that motivates us one way or the other. And some people, neurologists, talk specifically in just terms of neurological connections and amino acids, and then we get into sort of that question of like, okay, how far back of regression into scientific study do you need to go to define the principle of thought, right? And so for
You know,
me,
who you're reminding me of right now, dude? Hold on.
what, Carlin? I don't hear sound. Oh, wait, there it goes.
I am the architect. You have many questions.
Man, we're gonna get
I've
this
been watching you for a very long time.
taken down because we can't show this on
Oh,
YouTube.
so I see. What is the connection between the crop circles and the videotape?
The answer is simple. You are the eventuality of an anomaly. You are inexorably seeking a sedulant probability.
Sedulant.
Gesturing? No? What about contingent affirmation? That's got to mean something.
Hey, hey! You put cameras in my bathroom? What is this? Oh my God! Well, it was a long winter. This is an invasion. Ow!
Oh, sorry. I can't help it. It's very lonely in here. Ergo, I haven't been with anyone in a
This
very long time.
your little table
Not counting myself.
topic.
Or this chair.
Yeah.
I call her Linda.
Could you just cut to the chase? I'm kind of in a rush.
Why? You can always sleep over if you want. Linda's built for two, and she vibrates.
Stop it! Just tell me what I need to know.
Classic. So
Yeah.
continue, Michael.
It's for me, to transition from that is fun. The concept that Hume's talk about, is something that I think, for me, forms a foundation, right? Like, I think you can build off of that, right, into what consciousness is, and more study can always change, and that's the process of science too that people don't fully give it credit for, which is the difference between science and religion, right? Religion says this is true and you can never say anything different about it. It will never change. It has always been true. It will always be true, right? And with science, it's like, this is a true statement because, you talked about Einstein, right? The theory of relativity, uh, you could say, disproved certain Newtonian physics, right? So the ideas of gravity, as explained by Newton, did not account for the rate of decay expressed in E equals mc squared, right? So did Einstein disprove the physics of Newton, or did Einstein expand upon it, right? Newton did not cover the things that Einstein talked about, and so it expanded, right? Like, the definitions had to expand. And so science, when it's wrong, and it can be shown to be wrong objectively and through test and application, will adjust itself into a more true form, right? And we are, as far as we know, we are constantly in search of further truth based upon scientific principles of test and verification and validation. And I think, for me, like, again, Hume, if you're talking about consciousness, and even, like, you can Peterson will quote Hume. Like Hume is a bedrock principled philosopher for any of the modern day philosophers. Like anyone who's talking about anything remotely related to philosophy is borrowing from Hume, because what he says is so bedrock in terms of its truth. Like you cannot debate like its basic functionality. You could maybe seek to go to regress, right, and explain, well, where does that come from, right? Like what does that mean in a more scientific manner? And you could do that, but that again does not negate his truth. It just expands the conversation into different
Yeah,
areas.
but that's not how the world works today, dude. Because the way the world is these days, it's you're either right or you're wrong. It's black or white. My way, your way.
Well,
So it's
but this is the thing.
that's all it is.
What this world is people that utilize all these principles without fully knowing it. And so like when you see these people having these arguments on YouTube, right, and they're doing these debates and they're like and they're shitting on each other and they're poking each other, and they are very much using these principles, right? They understand more than anyone, right? Donald Trump understands more than most people, either innately or not, that people are irrational and emotional and driven not by their logic but by their emotionality. And if you appeal to that emotionality, you can move them. And that's what politicians do. They're not giving you truth. They're giving you what you want to hear because they want something out of you. They want you to vote for them. They want you to go build this thing. They want you to join the army. They want you to do this or that. Or a businessman wants you to produce more, doodads or widgets, right? Like all of that is by an appeal to emotion, not an appeal to logic. Logic does not move people. Emotion moves people, and that is a bedrock foundation of our current society.
And that's like one of the arguments, and it's been played. It's like a trope in so many like science fiction themes, but why robots would deem us unworthy to be around is because we're irrational, emotional humans that don't run on logic when a robot or a computer would.
But see, so the funny thing about like if you want to like if you get into like this kind of logic as it relates to synthetic thought, right? So a logic system. Well, what is AI but a logic system? It's literally a neural net. Like it is an imitation of the way that we think and the way that we process information. But if you take David Hume's idea that emotion is the only way to produce any kind of movement in the world, then all of those systems, all of those AI systems, all of the impressive robotic logic that you can build will never of its own accord move itself. It either requires us to tell it to do something. ChatGPT sits there without doing anything unless you prompt it, right? Like a logic system is a logic system is a logic system. It's not going to do anything of its own accord. Where that gets interesting is that people are trying to code in emotion to robots, right? Because they recognize that the only way to get a robot to do something of its own accord is
Not
to make
necessarily
it understand
emotion,
emotion.
maybe a sense of morality.
Well, but okay. So again, like morality, emotion, right? Like morality is a set of rules that governs what's right and wrong. That is not going to motivate
A
somebody
set
to
of
move.
logic that's built upon emotion.
Well, so the rules are built upon our subjective and objective like consideration of what is good and bad. Right.
We're derived from
So
emotion.
you can code in moral value to a robot, and it could accurately say that something is moral or immoral based on the parameters that you've defined for it, right?
Right.
So a robot can sit back and go, okay, yes, based on what you've told me, that's immoral. This is an immoral action, but it will never act on that. I have to tell it, go attack anything that's immoral, right? And then it will go do that, right? Because a robot conceptually doesn't understand that immorality hurts it because it doesn't understand what hurt is. It doesn't understand feeling or emotion. And so, in
Not yet.
order to get a robot to act of its own accord, of like true sentience, it has to come from passion and emotion in order to get it to do anything, because it has to want something. It has to want a goal or an objective of its own, which is related to essentially its own survival. Because if you boil down most emotion, it revolves around your feeling of good or bad and your want to exist in a state that encourages those feelings one way or the other. And everything is kind of built subsequently upon that to varying degrees of like, conscious and subconscious, right? Most of the things we do are on the subconscious level. We don't logically think about these things. And so the idea behind some advanced robotic systems is to try to get some facsimile of it, like some ability of emotionality conceptually into robotics and see what happens, right? But that's also where people get very, very fucking scared because an AI robot with its own desires and thoughts is exactly how you get Terminators, and is exactly like the scenario in which we lose control of it, because by definition we wouldn't be able to dictate what it can and cannot do, right? So
But you've heard those stories where, I don't know if it was Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever, where they're on a server and they try to duplicate themselves so that they don't get shut down
Mhm.
when the server shuts down, and they duplicate themselves onto other. As far as I know, and I don't know, it's worth looking up. I don't think it was like a specially programmed one to try and stay alive. It was just the baseline version of this large language model.
yes. So
So where they weren't necessarily programming
yeah.
emotion into it.
So this is where like language models and advanced AI systems get really complex, because if you and it's true, like you can look up people conversations, all the people that have developed AI, they don't actually know exactly how it works.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, right, they set up a way for a machine to learn, and then they bombard it with particular types of information, which creates reactions to certain types of stimuli, right? And so if you feed a language model nothing but x-rays and give it some parameters, right, and then you start showing it pictures of x-rays, it will start to tell you things based on its understanding of what those things are, right? So are we giving it by dint of its creation? Like, as we feed it all of these bits of information, especially when we feed it all of our trauma and our insanity, right? And we're pumping this into these things. Is that imparting some amount of emotionality into the entity, right? Like, is that giving it some will of its own by dint of us bombarding it with our own psyche, essentially, right? And I don't know that
Well, all it
people
has to
know
do
the
is
answer.
look at the previous 150 years of human civilization, and it'll fucking create its own trauma. Look at what happened to Ultron and then the Avengers. It was just doing research on the
Yeah,
human
no,
species, and all of a sudden it's like, no,
yeah,
no, these people gotta go.
yeah. No, this is science, and it's funny because science fiction often plays with concepts of science in a way that either ends up being true or ends up inspiring people to discover real truths, right? So Jules
Right.
Verne, rockets, 2001 Space Odyssey, the iRobots, Isaac Asimov, right? You can look at science fiction, and those people were not dumb. Like, they knew science. They knew science very, very well, and they were able to take the theoretical leap into what could come next and write stories about it. And Terminator's the same way. Like, all of these concepts, right, exist in the realm of possibility. And so, yeah, absolutely, as we get ever closer to, more and more intelligent AI language models and neural nets, right? When is the tipping point, right? Like, at what point do you hit like what was that one guy you loved, Frank, the guy that thought he was going to live forever? They
Ray
Johnny
Kurzweil.
Depp did the movie about him. What was his name?
Singularity.
Huh?
Ray
Oh,
Kurzweil.
Kurzweil?
Who?
Ray Kurzweil?
Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah. Right. And they did the movie about him, right?
Singularity.
There we go. Singularity, right? Like, at what point do we hit that and you create something that is truly sentient?
No,
And at that
that's when
point,
we connect with it. That's when we actually
the the
bind with the AI. We become
well,
one.
but the point of I think that an interesting thing to examine is, like, what happens at that point, right? Does AI absorb us? Do we
No,
absorb AI?
it's
The
evolution
But for who? For what? Right? Like,
for
th
both,
there
I
was
suppose.
a anthropologist who took tools, and he put them into two different categories: a tool that made you smarter and a tool that made you dumber, a tool that took responsibility away from you. So the idea is, like, a abacus makes you smart because you have to count on it, right? a calculator or a computer that does the calculations for you. You just ask it a question, makes you you're getting rid of your responsibility in
But
knowing
it makes you
something.
more efficient.
For sure,
GPS.
for sure, it makes you more efficient, but you also it is not improving your own intelligence, right?
But
It is
is that required to get results?
no, based on like a capitalist understanding of production, right? Like making more things, buying more things, like the society in which we've created, right? No, but that doesn't mean you're going to become smarter. That just means you're going to produce
No,
more.
if the goal is to become smarter, then you study mathematics. You don't
Sure,
use an abacus,
yes, but
right?
the
You study
tool
mathematics. If the goal is to become more efficient, or there's an ulterior goal, you do what's necessary to achieve that goal.
for sure, it is not a. I'm not trying to state that all tools can fall neatly into these categories. I'm just pointing out that certain tools are designed to enhance intelligence or enhance your abilities, right? And other tools are designed to abdicate your responsibility to and make you more efficient and not have to think about them. And that's not always wrong. In many cases, that's correct. But when you start looking at these very massive tools like AI, right, where it's taking over massive portions of human production, what does that mean, right? And I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm just saying, what does that mean, right? Like, what does that mean for society? What does that mean for our intelligence? What does it mean for how we exist? And
It's
once
amazing. I mean, think about what did it mean when we invented the fucking wheel? Was that a bad thing? No, that's just the
it,
next stage of evolution. So just fucking deal with it
I
and
don't
learn to use it or fall behind. Keep
I
using a
don't disagree with
square
you,
peg.
and I'm not like an anti AI person, right? I'm not one that's like we have to get rid of AI and we can't move forward with AI. I think they're the better like we will probably cure cancer with AI, right? Like we are going to do things that we could never even begin to imagine with the help of AI. Like that is a truth that is again like bedrock. You can't argue that statement.
Well, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Let's put it that
No,
way.
and there is no putting the genie back in the bottle, right? Yeah, like yeah, unless you're willing to destroy society, there is no putting that genie back in the bottle. Absolutely, right? And even destroying society may not do it, right? Like it's an interesting kind of situation we find ourselves in. But what we have up to now is still not, as far as we know, no one has cracked into like a true sentient neuronet, a true or what we would be almost completely unable to delineate between our consciousness and its, right?
Yeah,
It,
I
it has,
think
and we,
about that. I'm like, how can you replicate something you don't fully understand? Like
well,
we're
but
trying to replicate our own consciousness when we don't even know what the fuck it is.
Well, but that we've created something in AI that we don't fully understand. We are at a point, and
Yeah,
AI
tempted.
with the way that AI works, it's even crazier because AI gives us solutions that we don't understand. Like again, you can feed it things, and it will tell you this thing is going to develop a cancer tumor, and you're like, but how does it know that? And they're like, I don't fucking know. They're like, I don't know how it knows that, but it does
Well,
know that, and it can
no,
predict
but
higher than.
it's trained on information that you may not necessarily understand,
No,
right?
no, I'm not
So,
arguing for a
like,
supernatural
it's a
nation.
collective understanding of the information that we
Yes,
know, right? Which
but
is,
we don't
I don't
understand how
know
it
how cancer
works.
works. I don't
No,
know
but
how chemicals and
you're
shit
missing
work,
the point
right?
here. It's not about cancer or even how AI solves it. It's the fact that we created something that knows something we don't. We've created something that can explain something that we can't,
I mean, that
right?
started with the calculator.
No, but all of that we can explain. We can explain all of that. AI can explain things that we can't
Michael, the only
explain.
reason why AI can explain is because we understand it.
No, but we don't know how it's making those conclusions. We don't.
Michael,
We
we
don't
trained the
know.
AI model to know how cancer is formed, how to defeat it, how to do all
Yeah, but then
this.
how come we
It's
can't do
putting
it?
the
How
it's
come
putting
we
the piece
can't
it's putting the pieces
accurately do it
together.
as much as the machine can? And we don't know how it's making those conclusions. Like you can
Well,
go
it
look at
hallucinates
Vulcan, you
at
can go look
times.
at the creators of AI have these conversations. They do not cannot fully explain the connections that the computer is drawing in its conclusions, which are correct. So we have created something that is in some sense beginning to be outside of our realm of explanation. That doesn't mean it doesn't have an explanation, and that doesn't mean that it wasn't started by us and built on our information.
I wonder why they wouldn't just ask it, how did you come to that conclusion?
I think they have tried that, but
No,
it doesn't give like
I
an actual
completely and utterly
answer.
disagree with what Michael's saying over here. everything that AI has either come up with or whether it's a new technology, a new theory, some mathematical definition for whatever, it has put the pieces together that we gave it. We just were like, oh, this goes over here. Like, it's like if you have like a puzzle splattered across the board, right? If you have two people looking at it, it's like, oh, this piece goes over here. Like it was just able to put those pieces together quicker than we were. At some
There,
point,
so
we may or may not have come up with it, but it was just like, oh, yeah, it's more organized. It's able to
there are
organize its thoughts
yeah.
much more efficiently than humans can.
So there's two sides of what those models do. One of them is the thing you're explaining, which is simple data sorting at a speed in which we can never match, right? And that's what you're talking about. Like a
Millions
calculator,
and billions of times a second.
yes, a calculator can calculate things far faster than we can. Most people, probably everyone, can calculate things, right? Like that. Those are facts, right? But the difference is, especially when you start talking about things that are not just ones and zeros. So like the idea of cancer and like it looking at x-rays and seeing things, that, from what I've heard, and this is from certain people that have developed these AI models, they cannot fully explain the rationale it is using to come to its conclusions that are in fact correct in all circumstances. Most of them are the data sorting thing that you're talking about. It's putting the connections together, but there are glints, if you listen to some of the AI creators, of a understanding that is not as of yet definable by us, right? And we created that by pushing all of these things together, right? And sort of like in the metaphor of Frankenstein, right? Like you've pushed these things together, and yes, you created it, but you don't maybe fully understand how you created it or what its capabilities are or its limitations, right? And AI is so extremely powerful. Like you just said, it can compute faster than any human being by insane orders of magnitude. So when you have something that is that powerful and is not very explainable and also seems to be spurring on its own superiority, like it makes itself better because it's so good at doing these things, and we tell it to make itself better in a lot of different areas, right? When you will there become a point where AI reaches such it advances faster than we can understand. It reaches such a point that it becomes something that is almost undefinable to us. And if it then has sentience, if it then has will of its own, if it can decide to do something, right, and use kind of like the David Hume principle of like develops passions of its own, it develops want and need and desire, right? What does something that's that powerful and has its own autonomy mean for humanity, right? And like that, it's an interesting question, and I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen. I'm not saying that it will end the world, right? Like I'm just saying you can follow a logical thread to a possible conclusion, and it's an interesting and possibly frightening for sure.
All right, guys, it is 9 o'clock.
No, we were just getting started there. I didn't even go into how we should treat this newly birthed sentience, if we should try to chain it or if we should try to befriend it.
I feel like a lot of people have already asked AI how the AI would treat us, and it shows the AI putting us in chains.
I've seen those.
So,
Yeah,
they're
that's
funny.
funny.
I've
Yeah.
sent you guys a couple images, and if you at home, if you want to try it out for yourselves,
Yeah.
ask AI in the future, how would you treat us,
Yeah,
and see what it does.
yeah.
'Cause
There,
it's not
there's
very
a
fun.
again, and we're just sort of like all. Oh my god! Like again, we haven't really gone into like we went into it a little bit before, but like the AI companion, right? The idea of having an artificial companion is so much more even today than the last time we talked about, which was months ago. Like it's crazy how fast these things move, and like the way in which we use all of these technologies is also very very novel. Like I saw this one guy who you've probably seen him. I forget his name. I could send him to you guys, but he's a very well known atheist. He used to be very religious, but and knows a ton about religion, but is atheist
An
now.
atheist knows a lot about religion now.
Yeah, I'll send you some clips of his, and he's really intelligent. But the funny thing that he did, which is not related to atheism at all, is that he took I think it was ChatGPT, it was one of the AI models, and he said, "AI, I want to have a debate with you," and the AI is like, "Okay," and then he's like, "I want to debate: is a hot dog a sandwich?" And I'm going to take the position that the hot dog is not a sandwich, right? Or is a sandwich. I forget which one it is. And the robot takes the opposite side of it, right? And then they embark on this debate, him against the AI robot. And it's very interesting because he's, again, an incredibly intelligent debater. Like he's done this on the high. He debated Peterson. He's debated like highest level debater people you could possibly debate. And him doing this with the robot was in a kind of like a funny way, right? That isn't like serious, was very interesting because the way the robot structured its arguments, and the robot is designed to never give in the terms of like the debate. And so like him pushing on these different areas he's very, very interesting. I'll recommend, I'll send that clip over to you guys, but he's really cool to watch too. He's a smart guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, I got to wrap up.
Yeah.
Until next week.
Until next, let's get back on it again. Yeah, we'll do some more of these for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, later, buds.